Hi, this is the second video on learning data analysis. In this video, we'd like to focus on the process of doing statistics. And the first thing to note is that there's a quite involved process with several steps, and that students need opportunities to do all of parts of this process: formulate questions, collect data, analyze data, and interpret the results. Too often kids don't get opportunities to do some of these. Oftentimes we focus on analyzing data with students in statistics, and they get shorted on some of these other areas. They really need a chance to do them all. Let's take a closer look at them individually. What does it mean to formulate questions? Well, students should have the chance to think about what kinds of questions they might want to try to answer. And some of those questions are good to try to answer with statistical procedures, and those are the ones you can pursue. Vandewall's got a lot of nice ideas about ways to formulate questions with students. We can connect them to things about themselves, their families, their class and classmates, their schools, a lot of things that are accessible and interesting to students. Students should also have an opportunity to collect data. They can collect existing data, data that's already been gathered for some of their purpose they can get and use themselves. There's lots and lots of data out there on the internet, for example. But students can also collect new data, and if they're trying to answer questions about their class, they should have opportunities to collect data from their classmates. It can be more complicated for students than you might expect. They might have trouble organizing their data, making sure the data they gather matches the question they want, making sure that they're gathering one piece of data from each individual. Those kinds of things are more challenging for students than we might expect, and they need opportunities to collect it. Analyzing data involves a number of different things. At the most basic level, students should look to classify data into different categories, and that's some of the most basic activities you can do with students, is to ask them what kind of categories can we put these in, and simply classify data. We can also make lots of different kinds of graphs. You can see many different ones here that are possible to use to analyze data. Students should know how to make them, know how to interpret them, and know how to tell what their data is telling them from graphs. Oftentimes we emphasize making them by hand, and it's good for students to be able to make simple graphs by hand, but the interpretation is just as important or even more important, and a lot of times technology can make the creation of them easier so that they can focus on interpreting some of the many different graphs that they can create. Students should also analyze data by looking at measures of center, the mean or the average, the median is another measure of center, the mode. All are important for students to learn about and understand. One of the key things for them to learn is that there's really two ways to interpret the mean: a leveling interpretation, which is connected to their concept of division. Let's take a look at what we're talking about here. For example, if I've got 3 pieces of data, this is the number of green lifesavers 3 people have. Somebody's got 3, 4, 5 here, and the average is a leveling out of these in some sense. What would these 3 people have if they all had the same amount? So we say, okay, well, I'm going to take one from the biggest one and move it over to the smallest one, and then we'd all have 4. And so the mean number of green lifesavers is 4. And that's very closely connected to division, where we push all our lifesavers together and divide it into 3 equal parts. But the mean also can be thought of as a balance point. If we look back up at our 2 distributions up here, I said they both have the same mean, and that's because they both have the same balance point in the center here. As long as I move pieces up and down the same distance, they balance out the same, and so they have the same mean. And that's also a very important interpretation when you're considering sets of data. Students should also analyze variability, and we spent some time talking about that in the previous video. Last of all, students need to be able to interpret results. When they get the mean, when they look at a graph, can they interpret what those things are telling them about the data? An important part to connect back to context, and when we're connecting to context, we're doing statistics.